This is Nightly Business Report with Sue Herrera and Bill Griffin.
Pushing higher, the Dow hits a 6-month high. The S&P 500 posts a 6-day win streak as investors look for signs of progress in the U.S.-China trade relations.
Paying you back, why there's a chance that S&P 500 dividends could set a record this year.
Tackling personal finance, a pro football player is changing the game of money off the field. Those stories and much more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Thursday, April the 4th.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. The Dow closed at its highest point so far this year. The S&P 500 had its longest win streak since early 2018. All of this as President Trump and the Chinese vice premier met in the Oval Office to discuss some of the key sticking points on trade between the world's two largest economies. Now, some of that trade optimism spilled over onto Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 166 points to 26,384. The Nasdaq fell 3. The S&P 500 was up about 6. Eamon Javers is at the White House for us tonight with more on today's meeting. So, Eamon, what was said and what was the mood?
Yeah, Sue, that's right. I was in the Oval Office with the president and the Chinese vice premier today for the one portion of their meeting in the Oval, and the president said that progress is being made. He likes where things stand with this trade negotiation, but he also said that it could be 4 more weeks before we know whether there's a deal or not to be had here. And just as interesting as what he said here was what he didn't say. The president did not announce, as many expected he might, a date for a summit with Xi Jinping at which they would finalize this deal. So that is still off in the distance at some point. Not clear when exactly that would happen. I asked the president what the sticking points are here on the negotiations, and he mentioned 2. He said tariffs are a sticking point, and also the issue of intellectual property is still a sticking point as they negotiate this deal. And those are the 2 core things that this negotiation is about almost in their entirety. That's the core of this dispute. And the president is saying those are still the sticking points. So I think that gives you a sense of it could be a long 4 weeks here before we get to a resolution soon.
Eamon, thank you so much.
You bet.
Eamon Javers at the White House for us in Washington. Bill?
Well, trade is not the only thing that investors are focused on right now. The job market is also critical. And today we learned that the number of Americans filing for unemployment benefits last week hit their lowest level since 1969. Yes, 50 years. Jobless claims dropped by 10,000 to 202,000, further underscoring the robustness of the labor market right now.
But as is sometimes the case, there's conflicting data. According to a report from outplacement firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas, layoffs surged 35% in the first quarter. Now, that would indicate that the job market got off to a shaky start in 2019. The report says that companies may be streamlining their operations, and that's where the job reductions are coming from. But tomorrow might clear things up a bit when the government releases its monthly employment report. Economists are looking for an increase of 175,000 non-farm payroll jobs. The unemployment rate is expected to remain steady at 3.8%.
Elsewhere, the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase had a lot to say about the economy in his annual letter to shareholders. Jamie Dimon addressed a broad range of topics, including income inequality. In his letter, he wrote 40% of American workers earn less than $15 an hour, and about 5% of full-time American workers earn the minimum wage or less, which is certainly not a living wage. To address the problem, Mr. Dimon suggested that lawmakers and business leaders set aside partisan politics and put the needs of society ahead of personal, parochial, and partisan interests.
In recent years, there's been a big push to raise the minimum wage. Today, Target said it plans to increase pay for workers to $13 an hour from $12 starting in June. It would be the 3rd hike at the company in less than 2 years, with the goal of reaching $15 an hour by the end of 2020. The CEO says the wage increase and the investment in employees is the reason why the retailer was able to hire more than 120,000 seasonal workers in a very tight labor market.
So what kind of an impact does a minimum wage increase have on the economy right now? Joining us to talk about it is Ethan Harris. He's the head of global economics research at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Ethan, welcome back again.
Thank you.
You know, it's really Econ 101. When you have a tight labor market, you need to compete for workers, you raise wages. At what point do we start to see that creep into inflation numbers, do you think?
I think we've got a ways to go. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing now is more in the nature of catching up. Wages have not gone up very fast in this recovery. It took a long time to get the job market back to normal. Right now, there's a little catching up going on for Joe Sixpack. I do think in the next 2 or maybe 3 years, we'll see a more significant spillover into price inflation. But right now, I think we should enjoy the improvement.
Now, it also, does it not allow employers, even in a tight labor market, to be a little bit more discerning about what type of worker they want if they're going to raise pay? They're going to have a lot of applicants, but they can be a little pickier.
Yeah, I mean, for the firm, there's a real benefit here. Not only do you get to pick better workers, but you retain them longer, and you have a much more of an incentive to invest in them as workers. So while wages are going up, the costs of hiring and firing and the productivity of the worker is improving. So it's not a one-for-one cost increase for companies. There's actually a silver lining here.
But now we're talking about the unskilled workers. For skilled workers, we still hear from many companies about a shortage of skilled workers, and that's something that raising wages isn't going to really help, is it?
No, I mean, we have a problem as a country is we just haven't invested in a lot of the skills that we need today. So, for example, the manufacturing sector has a labor shortage in it. Even though everyone talks about us losing manufacturing jobs to foreign competitors, it's because we're not training workers to do modern manufacturing jobs, which are not, doing screws and putting bolts on. It's complicated computer stuff. So, yeah, there's a pretty significant shortage of skilled workers, and companies are really struggling to try to fill those jobs.
And once again, tomorrow's jobs report should be very telling. Ethan Harris with Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Again, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
In Washington, Democrats have long pushed to raise the minimum wage, but now they're talking about a new idea, a minimum retirement. Elon Mui explains.
There's growing concern in Washington that living through your golden years will take a lot of green.
There you go, Ned. There you go, Ned.
Yet many workers aren't saving on their own for retirement. 35% don't even have access to a savings plan through their employer, according to Pew. So Democratic Senators Chris Coons and Amy Klobuchar want to make companies step up to the plate. Their new proposal requires businesses to pay at least 50 cents toward your retirement savings for every hour that you work. Over a year, that would add up to about $1,000.
This would provide flexibility, portability, and sustainability for a workplace, a retirement savings account for tens of millions of Americans, as well as an easy-to-administer vehicle for emergency savings.
That sounds great for employees, but it could be really expensive for businesses, especially small businesses that would be forced to offer a new benefit. So the program provides a tax credit to offset the cost for up to 30 workers. Large corporations that already offer 401k plans or pensions would likely already be in compliance with the new rules.
A job should provide a wage, it should provide health care, it should provide a little bit of vacation time, and it should provide a retirement.
But this idea comes with a catch. The cost of those business tax credits can add up. The estimated price tag, up to $250 billion to the federal government over a decade. To pay for it, the senators are proposing raising the corporate tax rate from 21% to 23%. They're also talking about raising the top rate on the wealthiest households from 37% to 39.6%.
I think it's important that we identify some proposed offset for every new tax credit that's proposed.
The bill has the backing of centrist and progressive groups, as well as labor unions and the AARP. The senators said that they wanted to propose an idea that actually has a chance of becoming reality. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Elon Mui in Washington.
Also in Washington, President Trump said he's recommending Herman Cain for a seat on the Federal Reserve Board. Cain is the former CEO of Godfather's Pizza. He also served on the board of directors for the Kansas City Fed and was a former GOP presidential candidate.
Time to take a look now at some of today's upgrades and downgrades. We begin with Facebook, which was upgraded today to buy from neutral at Guggenheim. The analyst said that consumers are increasingly unfazed by content and privacy concerns. The price target now $200 even. Facebook closed the day at $176.02. And that same analyst at Guggenheim downgraded Roku to neutral from buy. The firm cited new risks from the launch of Apple's new video product. Price target there is $72. Roku closed at $64.49. That was down 6% today. And Micron Technology was downgraded to underweight from equal weight at Morgan Stanley. The analyst said that a rebound in memory semiconductor prices will not happen anytime soon. So the price target is now $32. Micron finished the day at $42.89. It was down 2%.
Still ahead, Tesla's CEO heads to court as investors try to make sense of a disappointing report on car deliveries. The CEO of Boeing apologized for the fatal 737 MAX crashes and said it was apparent that in both flights an anti-stall feature activated in error. In a statement, Dennis Muhlenberg said that it is Boeing's responsibility to eliminate that risk. He says the company owns it and knows how to fix it.
One of the big stock stories today was Tesla. CEO Elon Musk showed up in court today for a hearing regarding his ongoing battle with the SEC. The judge in that hearing gave the two sides 2 weeks to settle their differences. Meanwhile, the automaker's stock was down about 8% today after reporting sharply lower deliveries for the first quarter. Our Phil LeBeau joins us now outside the courthouse there in New York City. So let's start with what happened inside the courthouse. What are the differences that exist between the two sides, and what happens if they are not solved in 2 weeks?
Well, Bill, this went about as well as could be expected for Elon Musk, short of the judge outright dismissing the complaint from the SEC. And it really comes down to this. The SEC believes that Elon Musk violated his agreement in the agreement that they reached last year, where he said, and the SEC agreed with them, all of his financial communications would be pre-approved by Tesla. He sent out a tweet earlier this year. The SEC said, look, that's a material matter regarding the production of vehicles, and it should have been pre-approved. Elon Musk and his attorneys have said all along, look, it was not incorrect, it was not immaterial, I did not mislead people, and it was not in violation of the agreement. So what the judge has said today is, you two, meaning the SEC and Elon Musk's attorney, get together, work this out over the next 2 weeks. If you can't work this out, then I'm going to have to issue a ruling from the bench. And she made it very clear. She's in no mood to issue a ruling, and she does not believe that a contempt of court decision should be thrown around lightly. So she's hoping that her legal pressure will force the SEC and Elon Musk's attorney to work out maybe a modification of the SEC agreement they already have.
Also, Phil, the stock was under pressure today of Tesla because of disappointing car delivery numbers. What should an investor make of that?
We are in a lumpy period, Sue, in terms of deliveries. You're not going to have a straight linear growth for Tesla when it comes to deliveries. And this quarter, the first quarter numbers, was proof of that. And the question for investors is, do you have the stomach for the roller coaster ride that you get with Tesla, likely over the next couple of years when it comes to these deliveries? Because you're likely going to have one quarter like the first one, where not very good, and then a couple of quarters from now, they could be fantastic. So it's going to be a roller coaster for investors.
Phil LeBeau, who was in the middle of that media scrum in New York today. Thanks, Phil. See you later.
You bet.
We've been reporting on a high-stakes hearing taking place in Massachusetts. The outcome will determine whether Wynn can keep its gaming license in that state. Today, on the last day of testimony, some very senior executives made some very revealing remarks about the company's effort to conceal potential sexual misconduct by founder and former CEO Steve Wynn. Contessa Brewer has the details.
Wynn Resorts is paying more than $2.5 billion for Encore Boston Harbor. The casino resort is scheduled to open in June, but Massachusetts regulators are considering whether to yank the gaming license.
We don't have a business unless we have a license.
Board Chairman Phil Satry, CEO Matt Maddox, and a parade of directors and executives testified before the Massachusetts Gaming Commission during 3 days of hearings into how the company handled reports of allegations of serious sexual misconduct against founder and CEO Steve Wynn, charges he denies.
There were a lot of different people that I think were trying to protect Steve Wynn.
The investigative report concludes that the company didn't apply its own policies to Steve Wynn himself, that executives who knew about the settlements and allegations didn't report them to the board, and the company failed to protect employees. Wynn Resorts does not contest the conclusions.
I could kick myself from here to China that I didn't speak up.
Maddox came under fire for retaining a top executive last year who some employees mistrusted.
You were making excuses for high-level folks that had failed to do their job.
And for approving undercover surveillance of a former employee who was a named source for the Wall Street Journal article detailing a litany of allegations. Maddox's own suitability in connection with the gaming license is at stake.
This company is never going to be about a person again.
Maddox testified the company turned over a new leaf after Steve Wynn's departure, adding 3 new women to an overhauled board, instituting new policies and training. Executives blamed for the systemic failures left Wynn Resorts.
I am here by choice.
For the first time since the scandal became public, we heard from Elaine Wynn, the company's largest individual shareholder, and as such, subject to gaming license qualifications. She was a board member when the license was granted in 2013, but never revealed that settlement to regulators.
At the moment that my shares were free and clear to sell, I would have had an opportunity to do so and leave this company, but I chose not to. And I am here because I am Team Wynn.
Commissioners will now deliberate whether to let Wynn Resorts retain its license. So for now, it's a waiting game. Win, lose, or pay a hefty fine. For Nightly Business Report, Contessa Brewer, Boston.
Constellation gets a boost from beer, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus, with the wine and spirits maker reporting stronger beer sales that helped offset weakness in its lower-priced wine business. In fact, yesterday we reported that Constellation reached a deal to sell 30 of those lower-priced wine brands to Ernest and Julio Gallo Winery. Constellation brands closed 6.5% higher today at $191.45. Office Depot is warning about a potential revenue shortfall. The office supplies chain cited weakness in its CompuCom division. The company said that it is taking steps to improve its performance, which includes a streamlining of its operational structure. Shares fell nearly 24% today to $2.88. And Ford reported today that overall sales fell in the first quarter compared to a year ago. A drop in demand for passenger cars offset stronger demand for trucks and SUVs. The company said that the average vehicle cost was $38,000. That was an increase of $1,800 from last year, and the stock rose better than 1% today to $9.24.
TradeWeb is making its Wall Street debut. The electronic trading platform for bonds and derivatives twice raised the size of its offering from 27 million shares to 40 million. TradeWeb rose just about 33% today to 35.81. Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos have finalized their divorce. As part of the settlement, Jeff Bezos will keep 75% of the couple's Amazon shares. Mackenzie also plans to give Jeff all of her interests in the Washington Post and Blue Origin. Amazon shares were down a fraction to $1,818.86.
S&P 500 dividends are expected to set another record this year. The 2019 dividend payment growth rate could increase by as much as 8.9%, easily outpacing wage growth and inflation. We're joined tonight by Howard Silverblatt, a senior index analyst at S&P Dow Jones Indices and the person behind this data. Howard, good to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How much longer does this go on? I mean, this is what, the 8th record year we've seen now for the dividend increases?
It would be the 8th year, and it's a strong increase, even though it's less than last year. As you're saying, it's about a 9% increase is what we're projecting. Last year was 9.8. Bottom line is that investors are getting more money than they ever got. Companies are increasing their shareholder return and increasing it, although buybacks are the favorite here. And they're doing well as far as dividends go. So if they're looking for income, there's not a lot of places they can go. Right. Banks certainly aren't matching those numbers.
Right, and given the data that you put forward, dividends account for a significant chunk of long-term stock returns. If that's the case, why not just buy dividend-paying stocks and leave the rest behind?
Well, if it was 60 or 70 years ago, we probably would. Trading has changed. We're a little bit shorter on there. You know, dividend investors basically buy stocks. They live off the income or do the dividend reinvestment program, and their kids worry about the taxes. Today, it's more about trading, shorter term time periods, going on to capital appreciation, you know, an increase in stock price. So there's still dividend followers, and especially people who need the income. But the general market more looks towards quicker appreciation of stocks.
Which sectors do we see the best growth in these days? I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've asked a money manager if they buy utility stocks these days, and none of them say yes, but yet the utility stocks continue to set records here. So I would think that's one area. Where else can you find good dividend growth now?
Definitely utilities and financials. Financials are controlled, at least if you're going to buy the big banks, you know, the New York banks, that's controlled by the Fed, and that goes annually on that number. Another place where you'll get dividend payers, okay, if you just look at the payers, not the non-payers, believe it or not, is technology. They actually pay the most in dividend of any sector. The difficulty here is that you don't usually buy a technology issue such as Apple because of its yield, and Apple has a decent yield. I mean, it's very volatile. Again, dividend investors typically look for stability. Utilities, financials give them that. If you want to go for a longer game and a little bit more risk, obviously energy, which has been beaten down, even though oil's back to over 60.
Indeed. Howard Silverblatt with S&P Dow Jones Indices. Again, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, a football pro who's also a professor. His goal, to make people smarter about their money. When it comes to making plays, NFL linebacker Brandon Copeland is no stranger to success on the field, but it's how he plays it safe with his money off the field that may surprise you. Sharon Epperson has this great story for us tonight.
On the field, Brandon Copeland plays to win. Good job. Off the field, he's changing the game.
The conversation has changed from what do I have now to how can I use what I have now so that I don't have to depend on anyone else to give me a paycheck for the rest of my life.
A Baltimore native, Copeland grew up surrounded by the sport. His grandfather, Roy Hilton, spent 11 years in the NFL. For Copeland, football came naturally, but it was the skills he developed in the classroom that really paved the way.
My grandfather made it cool for me to be smart, be educated, and push to get A's and B's.
And it was that ethic that landed him at one of the most prestigious high schools around.
I was fortunate to go to a high school called Gilman in Baltimore, and the head coach of my football team, he ran his own hedge fund. But as a young kid, I didn't know what he did, had no idea. I just knew that he was pretty well off. And so one summer I went to work for him.
A summer that would help shape his future love of finance. He quickly learned that making money and understanding how to take it to make more would be his ticket to financial freedom. An ideology he fine-tuned when he attended the prestigious Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania.
When you were with your teammates in high school and in college, and even now, do they talk about money, and do they understand the importance of really understanding how to manage their own money?
The common denominator of most people in this world is we all talk about money, right? That's what we deem as successful and unsuccessful. The biggest money lesson I've learned is basically don't try to keep up with the Joneses. If that's not something of value to you, then Don't chase it.
And it's that lesson that Copeland wanted to share with others. A basic conversation about money that he said many are not being taught, even at the highest levels. So he reached out to his alma mater. He's now known at UPenn as Professor Cope.
There's a difference between security deposit and this earnest money deposit, right? The premise of this class is to talk about stuff that you actually will use in your lifetime, right? And my goal is that you don't come to that decision for the first time and you're trying to learn on the fly.
The course focuses on everyday finances, like how to budget yourself based on your salary. The basics, really. He co-teaches the class with Dr. Brian Peterson.
At a certain point in time, I knew the tangent of a 45-degree angle. Me personally, I don't plan on using it. And if I have to use it, I'll break out a TI-84 or I'll Google the answer, right?
Right.
We have the cameras, so you just see us make a lot of money and then you see us lose it. But if you've never been taught how to budget, if you've never practiced that, you hone your skills, you gain those reps, but you give a 21-year-old kid $2 million and say, hey, good luck, you know, don't lose it. Now, players are talking about money, but not just talking about, oh, what I'm going to buy this or I'm going to get this. It's more about what are you invested in.
So now your conversations with teammates aren't just about what you're going to get, but how you're going to get there.
Exactly.
A lesson in life he hopes will help others change their financial game. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Sharon Epperson in Philadelphia.
Here's another look at the final numbers from Wall Street. The Dow gained 166 points. The Nasdaq fell 3. S&P 500 was up about 6.
And tomorrow's the big jobs report.
It sure is. So join us.
Yes.
That does it for us tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow.